Hello everybody, this is Tip Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I am continuing my series I call Magic the Marveling, where I turn every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and Disney Plus TV show and turn them into little Magic the Gathering sets. Now, I've done one for everything that has come out so far, and today I am adding on with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different, and I have a couple things to say before we actually jump into it, so let's just start with those. First thing, pronunciation. Some of the names in here I'm going to mispronounce, and I do not mean any offense by it, but just know that going into it. Second off, this is the first Marvel movie that has come out while I'm doing this project that did not come out on Disney Plus or has been out for a while. And essentially what that means is that there are very few images from the actual movie online. So as of the release of this video, I am only going to be releasing the cards talked about in this video. Typically, I will showcase between 10 and 20 cards, and then there will be a bunch of like commons and uncommons that are also created that support the themes of the cards, but I just can't create those until I get access to more images from the movie. And so once that movie comes out on something like Disney Plus or DVD or Blu-ray or something along those lines, and I have access to more images, you can expect either a video or at least an announcement on my community page when the full website goes up with all of those cards. So today we're going to be taking a look at it. It also means we get a little bit of a, earlier look at them. So that's pretty fun. Now, for those of you who haven't seen my other videos, it is not to worry. You don't really need to know anything about the past videos. There's only a couple little things, and we'll talk about those as we go, but let's just jump into this. So let's start with the first main card, Shang-Chi. He is a 2 red, green, white legendary hero human warrior 3/3. Now, when I'm designing these little sets, I design them with themes and tribes in mind, and this one is no exception. I kind of divided this set into 4 different, I don't want to say tribes, but 4 different kind of themes. And we have the kind of the village people, we have the 10 rings, we have Shang-Chi and the people that he goes with, and we have kind of the soul suckers at the end. And so he is going to kind of be leading that. And so the colors of Shang-Chi and everyone who are kind of the protagonists of our story are going to mostly fit into these 3 colors. So he's a legendary hero, which this is one of the only things you'll need to know from previous stuff. Essentially, hero just means he's a creature with the type of hero, and that is literally just to save space on the type line because some creatures like Thor have so many types already. It just allows for easier reading of the card. Either way, it's a 3/3 with first strike and vigilance. Whenever a creature with power greater than Shang-Chi's power attacks or blocks, put a +1/+1 counter on Shang-Chi, then draw a card. So essentially, we care about when creatures with power greater than Shang-Chi are doing things. And the reason for that, from a kind of a lore perspective, is that he is following up in his father's footsteps, who maybe not scared of him, but was always kind of, I don't want to say in the shadow, but being trained to try and become better. And we kind of get this line in the movie of, oh, you want to wear these? Well, once you show me you're strong enough to wear them. And so he's going to keep growing and getting better until eventually he is able to kind of win in the end. But then you can pay 2 mana and tap and remove up to 2 counters of a single type from target permanent. So this is a little bit interacting with cards in the set. The 10 rings, which is a card, cares about ring counters. And this can be kind of him, I don't want to say taking stuff away, but he can kind of calm down an opponent, and it'll make, that ability is one of those ones that'll make more sense once you see other cards. But it also means that if your opponents are using +1/+1 counters to boost up their creatures, you can remove them. You can maybe temporarily boost your opponent's creatures, and then when they attack, and then remove the counters so that you get the trigger on Shang-Chi. So some really interesting things you can do. You can also remove the +1/+1 counters from Shang-Chi so that you can get more of those draw card triggers when creatures attack. So pretty cool. And then first strike makes this pretty good. All right. So then we have Wenwu. This is going to be a 5-cost black and a red, and I know I just butchered the pronunciation horribly. Legendary villain, human warrior, 5/4. So 5/4 for 5. And whenever it or another warrior you control attacks, create a copy of target equipment attached to that creature. So this guy's big thing is the fact that he has the 10 rings, and so I wanted him to be something that cared about equipment in a way that was a little bit interesting. So he's going to care about equipment and warriors because that is what the 10 rings are considered, at least in this set. And then he says, whenever a warrior you control dies, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a warrior or equipment from among them and put it into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. So essentially, if one of your warriors dies, you kind of just go ahead and replace them or trade them for power in the form of an equipment. And so I think it just makes a lot of sense. The first ability, you know, you're constantly growing your empire, and then the second one, you're replacing your kind of men as you go. And so I feel like it's just a very lore accurate card. And yeah, so I just really like it. You know, obviously the difficulty in designing these cards is that you have to find a balance of both interesting card design and lore accuracy. Because if I just focused on lore accuracy, which sometimes does happen, you get these cards that just don't make sense and aren't fun. And if I just focus on card mechanics, they don't make a ton of sense. And I feel like I struck a pretty nice balance here. But we have the 10 rings. This is a 2-cost legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature has flying and first strike and gets +X/+O, where X is half the number of ring counters on the 10 rings. Then it says, whenever a ring counter would be put on the 10 rings, if it already has 10 or more ring counters on it, instead draw a card. And then you can pay 3 mana to put a ring counter on the 10 rings and equip 3. So, at its base, it's a 2-cost legendary artifact that equips for 3 that gives flying and first strike. Not bad. But then you can pay 3 mana and put ring counters on it to boost up your creature. And then once you get that up to 10, you can then pay 3 mana to draw a card. So it's going to be nice in those equipment style decks. It is going to be just a nice card that can be an equipment early game, and then later on in the game may be able to start generating you value. It is very difficult to do, but I see decks where you care about counters a little bit mattering a little bit more, and so here Shang-Chi can steal those counters by taking them off, kind of part of the inspiration of that ability. But that ability was also meant to be just a mechanical thing, so you can remove his counters to then draw more cards. But either way, I just really like the way this works. It is going to promote attacking, which Shang-Chi wants to block, and then it's also going to promote attacking, which, you know, our bad guy really wants to do. So it's able to help both sides, and the rings end up in both hands. So I just felt like it made a lot of sense. Next, we have Ying Nan. It is a green, white, blue legendary creature, human advisor warrior, 3/4 with vigilant. Whenever one or more creatures you control block or become blocked, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is what I'm calling the village people, or the Tallow people. They care about lands, and that makes sense. They are protectors of the land, but they're also going to care about blocking, and whether they get blocked or become blocked, or sorry, they get blocked or block something, that is their kind of duty, is to defend from letting this evil thing escape. And so they're going to reward you for doing that, and then also care about lands a little bit, which makes sense in those colors. Then you can pay 1 and a white and tap and remove target creature from combat. Activate this ability only if a land has entered the battlefield this turn. So you can stop something your opponents are doing. So you can, for instance, block one creature, use that to put a land on the battlefield, and then because a land entered on the battlefield, you can use Ying Nan to remove another attacking creature, or you can then remove the creature that blocked from combat. So you can do some really interesting things to mix up combat. And I feel like it's actually a really interesting balance, where maybe you have some cards that care about when they attack or again become blocked, and then you can use this ability to make sure that they are able to attack safely. So I think it's an interesting balance. Then we have Xialing. I know, again, I mispronounced that, and I apologize. It's 1 red for a legendary hero human warrior 3/2 with first strike. Whenever it attacks, if an opponent controls a creature with greater power than its power, it gains menace until end of turn. So essentially, you know, the idea is, doesn't look like much, didn't get a formal training, but even if you have a bigger creature, she's still going to be able to get in there and hurt you and kind of get that damage through. And so that's what that ability is for. And then you can pay 2 and a red, and target warrior gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So it's almost like fire breathing, like 0.75 fire breathing, where it's not 1 red mana to 1 damage, but also it lets you give it to other things if you want. And the fact that this has first strike and menace means that that ability can be very, very deadly. And so I think this is a simple card, but a powerful one. And that's honestly what I'm trying to do. I've been looking back at past cards because I am going to be doing, I don't want to say remasters, but a remaster of some of my older stuff. And just, I made the card so complicated. I'm trying to find a good balance of lore accuracy while still being simple and interesting. And so it's kind of this third aspect that in the past I didn't really pay attention to, and now I am, where it's just like simple. Like, this still isn't necessarily a simple card, but it's not like Wanda from WandaVision, who literally had the most text in the entire, like, out of all cards, or Dracoff from even Black Widow. He actually had the most text on any card. And so those things are being changed a little bit to make it so that you're not reading paragraphs in order to understand the card. Next, we have Ying Li, 3 and a green for a legendary creature, human warrior, 3/6. Whenever a land or warrior enters the battlefield under your control, Ying Li gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Caring about land, I don't want to say it's not a super relevant ability, but it's going to just continue that theme of caring about land while also turning it into kind of the ability to defend or attack, which you could say she was kind of the defender of Tallow, and that kind of makes sense. And then you can tap, and another target warrior gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Ying Li's power. She does end up passing on to this power, so to say. And so she's able to take all the stuff that she accumulated from lands or warriors entering the battlefield and kind of give them to other things. Warriors is there because also the Tallow people are warriors as well, just because I don't know if there's a better classification using existing magic creature types. But it also means that if she is with the 10 rings, or at least with her husband in that style of deck, it's still going to be able to function. So that's just a little bit of lore accuracy there, but this is really going to be landfall +1/+1, and then you can put those +1/+1 on other things, or at least, do some really cool stuff. And the fact that you can do it at instant speed is where a lot of the power of this card comes from. Next, we have Dweller in Darkness. Okay, this art will end up changing when more comes out, but this is concept art for Shang-Chi, and this is the only thing I could even find on the internet with the picture of it. So just keep that in mind. It's 4 white and a black for a legendary creature dragon, 3/6 with flying. Whenever another creature would die, instead exile it with a soul counter on it. Dweller in Darkness gets +X/+X, where X is the number of cards in exile with soul counters on them, whether it's yours or your opponent's. Then you can pay 2 and remove a soul counter from a creature in exile to tap target creature. So you can kind of weaken Dweller in Darkness, but if something's kind of in the way, the idea is that this Dweller in Darkness is killing things and getting more powerful based on that. And so it's going to just get bigger. And then I wanted it to be a little bit more dynamic because I basically have a card like this with Eliath from Loki. And I thought maybe if we can do some interesting things with the cards in exile. And I felt like tapping, restraining a creature made some sense and was still powerful and relevant. Next, we have the Great Protector, so the opposite end. It is 3 green, white, blue for a legendary creature dragon, 4/5 with ward 4. So it does cost 4 basically more to target this. This is another one where it's a lot of different text, but let's go through it. The Great Protector costs 1 less to cast for each creature that has been exiled under your control this turn. So it's going to come out when you really need it. So once the Soul Suckers come out, you're going to be able to get the Great Protector out a lot easier. And it also means in your deck, if you are flickering things, for instance, you may be able to get the Great Protector out pretty early. Then, whenever a creature you control is targeted by a spell an opponent controls, the Great Protector fights up to 1 target creature. So someone tries to kill your stuff, the Great Protector is going to come out and try to quote-unquote defend or at least get some retribution and go after the opponent. And then whenever it fights, draw a card, then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Drawing a card and then putting a land onto the battlefield tapped is a powerful ability. This thing requires it to fight, which means your opponents either have to target it with something or you have to get it to fight. But I think it's kind of an interesting card because you can it's not when it's targeted by a spell, it fights and draws a card and puts a land. It's 2 separate abilities, meaning you can either try and get all of the abilities by getting your opponents to target it, which by the way, it has ward 4, so it's hard to target this specific thing. So your opponents are going to target other stuff, in which case the Great Protector can then attack. Or you can try to trigger it by having your own fight spells. So I think that's really a dynamic part of this card. Next, we have Katy Chen, 3 and a white for a legendary hero human, 2/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls a creature with greater power than Katy Chen's power, draw a card. So this is limited to 1 time per turn. So I try to not break the color pie. White card draw, there's been some rules set up recently. It can be triggered by things your opponents do, or it can be limited to once per turn, and this is both. It's limited to once per turn, and it's only if your opponent's creatures have greater power. But here's the thing, you can give a creature you don't control +1/+0 for 1 green mana. But now it's not just a mono white card, it's a white green card. And so if you have that green, you do get a little bit more manipulation over whether you draw a card, but is it worth the mana? Is it worth boosting up your opponent's creatures? Probably not, but I do think it's still an interesting design, and it means that other cards that care about creatures with greater power can use this card to manipulate it a little bit more. Then you can pay 1 generic mana, and Katy Chen gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Only your opponents may activate this ability. So they can almost combat it. So if they really don't want you drawing a card, or if you have some other effect that means that you don't get that relies on your opponents having a greater power creature, your opponents might be able to stop it, but in doing so, they are boosting up your creature. So I thought this was an interesting political card, and one that would be really good in something like Commander. First off, it's much more likely your opponents control a creature with greater power, and then also, it's a lot more of a manipulation game. It can also be like, hey, I'm swinging at this person, I can kill them if you pay some mana into this, and so you get some really cool stuff. Or you can be like, I'll boost up your creature if you boost up mine, and so you get these kind of cool little things. Next, we have Trevor Slattery. It is blue and a red for a legendary creature human 2/2. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, counter that spell and draw a card. Then that player gains control of Trevor Slattery until the end of your next turn. So, if they want to kill this, they have to not only kill it on your side of the board, or at least target it with a spell, I should say, on your side of the board. Then they have to gain control of it and kill it while it's on their side of the board. And so the idea is, oh, he's going to just pretend to be on your side and then come back. You know, he's going to play dead in order to avoid the spell, and then maybe even have to pretend to be on the enemy's side, and then he'll come back to you. I thought it was just an interesting card. This one was one that was designed, it was designed with the idea in mind of an actor, just generally, and I thought, ooh, this was an interesting way to do things where you can maybe give your opponent your own creature, and then you maybe boost this guy up a little bit and see kind of what happens. But I don't know, it's kind of an interesting design, and I kind of wonder what you could do with it in something like Commander. Next, we have Tallow. It's a legendary land, and it says you may play this land only if you have played another land this turn. So, already really weird. You can only play 1 land per turn, which means you either have to, A, have more land drops, or B, put this onto the battlefield with an effect that says, put a land from your hand onto the battlefield, which you'll notice there's a pretty decent amount of. And then you can tap and add green or white, and this does come in untapped, because if you're going through all those other hoops, you deserve an untapped dual land. And then you can pay 1 and tap and look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal one of them, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So you're actually shuffling your library, you're not putting them back. So if you can get this onto the battlefield, it's a very amazing land, but it's legendary and kind of has to be put onto the battlefield through some extra land effect. And so with those two things combined, it's a little bit inconsistent and almost wouldn't take the spot of a land. Like, you shouldn't put this in a land slot in your deck because, first off, it can't just be a normal land. And second off, you need some effect to play it. Therefore, it's almost the same as if it was a spell. And so I thought that was an interesting way to design a land. And I kind of want to design more cards similar to this, where it limits when you can cast it. I don't know why, but I feel like that could do some really cool stuff, and I'm actually working on some stuff for What If, and some of it does happen to do stuff like that. And that is it for the revealed cards. So typically, I would say, hey, go check out the rest of them in the link down below. I will probably still link down below, and you'll be able to see the cards that I talked about here today, but the full website will not be up until after Shang-Chi comes out on either DVD, Blu-ray, or Disney Plus, depending on when I start to see enough photos that I feel like I can do it. I will still be designing cards, and so it should come out pretty quickly after that, but we will see. I want to know your guys' thoughts on this new style in the comments down below, as well as all the cards here today. If you found any errors, let me know as well. These are slightly before final release versions that I'm showing you here, but yeah. Thank you for all of you for watching. If you enjoy, we also have a bunch of these on the channel ranging all the way back to Iron Man. I will see you in the next one. Bye.